Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of the Scene to Screen podcast. I'm AJ and this is my review of the new Wes Anderson film Isle of Dogs. I don't really need to introduce Wes Anderson at this point, although I guess I will anyway. He's well known in modern cinema for his impeccable direction, art design, cinematography, as well as for his often low-key and sometimes twee narratives. I'm often on one side or the other with Wes. Some of his films I love, such as Rushmore and the Grand Budapest Hotel, for their well-written central characters and compelling storylines. But with some of his others, I feel that for all of their merits, they're more just enjoyable but fairly flawed films, such as the lush but slight Moonrise Kingdom, or his immediate but unsatisfying debut Bottle Rocket. Isle of Dogs is Anderson's second foray into stop-motion animation filmmaking, after his 2009 adaptation of Roald Dahl's classic The Fantastic Mr. Fox. I didn't really gel with that film. There was something off, even claustrophobic about it, and its atmosphere and sound design kind of stopped me from being able to get into it. But it's a film that I'd like to revisit at some point soon, especially after now having seen Isle of Dogs. I didn't have that same issue with Isle of Dogs. I was able to instantly connect with the speaking dogs. They didn't just feel like animated avatars with celebrity voices pasted over the top. Bryan Cranston is an instant standout as Chief, an independent stray who sees himself as the leader of a small pack of dogs surviving as best as they can on Trash Island, where the dog population of a futuristic Japan has been deported to after they contract a pair of chronic canine diseases. Cranston plays Chief in an almost Heisenberg-esque manner, giving the dog a rough and dangerous voice befitting of his personality. Edward Norton also does a great job as Rex, a quick, quipping dog who provides a lot of the best laughs in the film. Most of the other dogs in the pack are sadly fairly forgettable, despite being voiced by the likes of Jeff Goldblum and Bill Murray. This is an all-star cast to be sure, with great turns by Greta Gerwig and Tilda Swinton, to name a few, and there are even more in the supporting cast, quite frankly too many to name, but most of the roles feel fairly superfluous, like they could have been played by anyone. The addition of natural Japanese speakers is a good addition to the film, and all of them fit their roles perfectly, even Yoko Ono, whose main contribution to the film is basically just a scene of her crying, and not that that's a surprise to anyone who knows the work of Yoko Ono. Koyu Rankin plays our young hero Atari, and his quiet, understated sense of determination is a welcome respite from the usual loudmouth kid heroes we get so often in the West. His role is very important to the film, and I just love the fact that most of it is done through very little words, and when there are words, although they're not in our language, you still get across the full feel of what he's saying. So onto the story. Personally, I found it highly engaging, and although I got the sense that it was likely going to have a fairly happy and neat conclusion early on, I was still rooting for our protagonists, both human and canine, with anxious excitement. The plot beats are mostly rather familiar, taking the form of a classic adventure story, and whilst I feel and wish that it was taken in perhaps a more daring or original route, I still feel like it worked for what it was. It frequently reminded me of The Brave Little Toaster, with its general accessibility for kids, but also containing some darker scenes that come as somewhat of a surprise. I respect this. Too many kids' films these days play it too safe, offering no real thrills and no real stakes. Isle of Dogs isn't afraid to take chances, and those chances mostly pay off, both with moments of surprising humour and genuine tension. It'll be the kind of film that viewers that saw it when they were young can revisit and appreciate even more as they get older. However, I still feel that it could have taken more narrative risks and raised its enjoyability and uniqueness even further. Compared to, say, one of the Toy Story films, it plays its narrative incredibly straight and without many interesting twists and turns. The animation is, of course, fantastic. It's so fluid that it's easy to forget that you're watching stop motion. The sets are incredibly detailed, and the way that Anderson moves his characters through these spaces is a genuine pleasure to behold, making great use of the side-scrolling style that he used in The Fantastic Mr. Fox to give the plotline a definite sense of purpose and direction. The human characters' expressions were wonderfully emotive, and often dialogue wasn't even needed to figure out how the characters are feeling or what their motivations are. And the dogs. They're somehow both cute and slightly creepy, and the naturalistic way that their fur moves around frame by frame is a marvel just itself. To be honest, I wish they had more breeds of dogs in there just to see their take on those breeds, but I understand that it must have been such an artistic effort just to animate the dogs that we do see properly, that it would have dragged production out to unbearable extremes for those involved. Personally though, I wanted to see more Japanese dogs in there, some Shibas and Akitas to reinforce the environment and culture that the film takes place in. And that brings me around to what I feel is perhaps the film's largest point of failure, its use and representation of Japanese culture. I don't see many points really to be offended about as per se. I personally can't really be offended by this film because it's not my own culture, and I don't think that taking a slightly stereotypical approach to another culture or cultures is inherently bad. Anderson used a fictional Europe to great effect in the Grand Budapest Hotel, for example, but I was left feeling like the cultural setting was more just window dressing than anything else, and that Anderson often squandered the possibilities presented by the setting and environment. It often showed very little deep knowledge of Japanese culture. For example, the villain Maya Kobayashi is at one point shown attending a sumo wrestling match, which appears to be his chosen pastime. I think it would have been more clever, more applicable, and more interesting if, instead, for example, they'd shown him watching a stop-motion recreation of the end of Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. Considering that Anderson points to Kurosawa as one of the main influences on this film, he didn't show much knowledge of the great director's work outside of a few scant Seven Samurai references. The decision to make all the explosions in the film mini mushroom clouds does seem a little bit off to me, but I've no idea how Japanese audiences will react to that, so I'll reserve my comment on that matter. Then there's the thing about Tracy, the exchange student, voiced brilliantly by Greta Gerwig. I don't really see her as a straight white saviour archetype, as some have said. She could just be seen as an example of the occasional need for an outsider to come in to help things change and to give a new perspective, and she leaves the most crucial heroism to Atari. But the only reason we needed Tracy as a character was due to Anderson's decision to not subtitle the Japanese in the film, thus needing a centralish character who speaks English to help the audience understand how the plot is unfolding away from Trash Island. I think it would have been better if the whole film was just in Japanese with English subtitles other than the dogs. I think a heavily foreign language semi-mainstream film is much more groundbreaking than offering the native tongue without subtitles, especially considering how frequently translators are used in the film. I mean, I understand wanting to get Frances McDormand in your film, who wouldn't? But it just felt like Anderson was finding solutions to problems he himself had created. I feel like Anderson tried to commit to the idea, but ultimately just didn't go far enough. The film would lose very little if it just weren't set in Japan at all. Compared to his deconstruction of World War II era Europe in the Grand Budapest Hotel, this chosen setting feels light on detail and light on cultural understanding. It's like he set the film not in Japan, but in a tourist catch-all wish you were here holiday postcard from a Tokyo market stall. Regardless of this letdown and a few others mentioned, I really did enjoy Isle of Dogs a lot, and I think it's one of the stronger of Wes Anderson's films. If you want a bit of entertaining and cute escapism with a bit of an edge, then I definitely recommend it. However, I suppose I'm held back slightly by the fact that I can see how this film could have easily been a masterpiece, and how it fell short of that status. I'm feeling a decent to strong 7 on this one personally, so that's the review. What did you think of the film? Drop us a message on Twitter or Facebook and let us know. As usual, if you enjoyed this review, feel free to follow us on social media and subscribe to our various channels across the web, and we will see you in the next episode.